right. What's up, everybody? We are live, Mags and Slabs, episode 9, I believe. I am Brad from Sports Magazines and History, and I'm here with Mike. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Good to be back.
Yeah, man. It's been about a month. I think it's been a little over a month since our last
Mm,
episode, and I've definitely missed it.
I have to. Yeah, things get a little crazy, near the end of the year here with the holidays. Also, there's been a lot of like sickness going around these days, and I'm trying to scave off of that and keep myself healthy. But those things, I think, kind of got in the way of our last episode we were hoping to do. But I'm glad that we're here now.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the encouraging part was we had multiple people reach out to us over the past month being like, "Hey, when's the next episode?" So,
Yeah.
glad to hear that some of you were uh ready to hear us talk about magazines again. So, here we are, and let's go ahead and jump right in. The first topic that we're going to talk about is just a little bit of a bombshell news story that came out a couple weeks ago that we thought was pretty interesting, and that is related to Sports Illustrated. And some reporter from what was it, Futurism? Is that what it was called,
Yep.
Mike?
Futurism.com.
Futurism.com. Some reporter came out with a great investigative story, basically busting Sports Illustrated for using fake authors that had like AI generated photos and like made up profiles and even some AI generated articles. And basically, whenever the reporter reached out to Sports Illustrated to ask about it. They did not respond, but all of these um, fake authors immediately disappeared. They were immediately taken down from the website. So it was like, Sports Illustrated was pretty much caught red-handed and tried to cover their tracks really quickly. I think they did end up responding a day or two later and basically blamed it on like a third party company that they were working on and saying that they didn't even realize they were doing it. And then me and Mike just found out earlier this evening when we were looking into it that I guess the CEO of the Arena Group, which is now the company, Sports Illustrated no longer is a part of Time Inc. anymore. I think that changed hands sometime in the 2010s. It's now a part of Arena Group, and they fired their CEO over this. So kind of a big deal. Mike, what are your thoughts on this bombshell?
It is a big deal, and it's a lot of food for thought. I'm surprised that they didn't immediately just try to blame it all on Ortiz, who, by the way, is a neutral white male, which is how his headshot was created. They created two journalists, Drew Ortiz and Sora Tanaka, and they did it through a website that they can create these headshots, and then they also apparently um, likely created the content through something like GPT. So yeah, no, it's crazy. The thing that's really bad about this is that they weren't transparent. That's what's important. These sort of things, we're going to see more and more of this. We're going to see more and more of AI becoming a part of what seemed to be, very organic, life otherwise, and that's true for media as well. So yeah, it's a crazy thing. It's a crazy story. Uh, is it okay if I grab the sharing here,
Yeah,
Brad?
take it, pull it up.
Okay.
But as you're doing that, I agree with you. I mean, they were not transparent about it at all. And it's kind of the article talks about how the investigative report talks about how some of the SI articles sounded like they were written by an alien, is what they said. And it said that one of the Ortiz articles, for instance, described volleyball by saying that volleyball can be a little tricky to get into, especially without an actual ball to practice with. And it's just like some random, sentences that don't make sense and clearly were written by AI.
Yeah. It's still at the point where you can usually figure out when it is still written by a bot. This is the other writer, Sora Tanaka. So, these websites can create these people using, all sorts of, like, bits of information from billions of photos, basically, to create non-existent humans. Yeah, it reminded me of another story that I heard months back, um, about an art competition that was meant for emerging artists, and the artist that ended up winning, did digital art, which is not uncommon for artists. And um, the thing is that this person used a ton of AI, used Midjourney basically, which is a generative AI platform. And he did actually state that he used it, but the judge was not familiar with what Midjourney meant. So in his defense, he was transparent about it. It's interesting that he was able to win the competition, um, using it, though. And the thing is that these AI is becoming a part of. I'm a graphic designer, and it's becoming a part of my general workflow these days. I do a lot of stuff in Photoshop and that sort of thing, and it just basically supplements some tools where I can do some things easier, or I can implement things that I couldn't implement in the same way before. But I'm still doing work, and even he mentions that this still took a lot of work. He didn't just put in a one line of text and this came out. He had to do, like he said, 80 hours worth of work to make this happen. And it is beautiful, but it needs to be in the right category, basically. These things need to be transparent. These things need to be, um, shared for what they really are. And it's going to become increasingly difficult in all sorts of things in our everyday life, I fear. And I'm not sure what the guardrails and guidelines are going to be. I think it's going to differ from one arena to the next, but there's going to be a transition period here, I think, for just life in general, where there's going to be a lot of gray area. So
Yeah, and some people may be listening to this and be thinking, okay, well, what's the connection to this and like the hobby of collecting? And to me, my biggest takeaway is, it's very sad how far the mighty have fallen when
mhm.
you look at Sports Illustrated. I mean, when you think back to its inception and just the decades of award-winning journalism and photography and just the nostalgia and how that has diminished over the years. And we already know that it's been doing it even before this happened, and like I said, the publication was sold away from Time Inc. not all that long ago. It went from the weekly publication that we knew for decades to, for a very short time, it was bi-weekly, and then it quickly transitioned to what it is now, which is monthly. And, I think a lot of people don't even realize that Sports Illustrated even exists anymore in a printed publication, but it does once a month, and it's just a shell of what it used to be. The covers, for the most part, are embarrassing. There's been some really bad covers in the past couple of years. There's not as much substance. And gosh, to see this come out, I already have been asking myself and wondering, like, how much longer is Sports Illustrated going to be able to survive as a print publication in its current form? And then with this, it just makes me feel even more that way. And once again, it's so sad when you think about there's so many like legendary writers and historic names over the years, Dan Jenkins and Frank DeFord and Curry Kirkpatrick and Rick O'Reilly, like all these guys and the institution that they helped build, through Sports Illustrated. Gosh, and to come to this, it's just that's my biggest takeaway. It's really sad, and it just makes me wonder how much longer Sports Illustrated is even going to be here at all in a print form.
My head went there as well. Journalists that have won awards for their writing, and Sports Illustrated in general had such a has historically had such a great reputation for its writing. They did not do themselves a service here in the least. Um, as far as longevity, this is something I think about too. You may be right. Maybe they are closer to the end than not, but I still wonder if people really do, crave that physical item in their hand. And us as collectors are kind of proof of that to a large degree. We like to have that. You see like physical media of all sorts is like, becoming collectible, VHS tapes and CDs and all sorts of, random things that people will actually just want to have that physical item, whether it be for nostalgia or if it's just they feel that it's historical or what it might be. But there is a disconnect between the experience and having a physical item in your hand and not and just like seeing something on the screen.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do think that there's still a large portion of people that want that physical, tangible magazine in their hands, but the question is there big enough group of that to support the bottom line? Because,
Yeah,
that's really all that these publications are looking at anymore. And, um, there can be that nostalgia out there, but if there's not enough people who are actually subscribing and buying the magazines, then it's just not going to matter. And,
yeah,
one part of me thinks Sports Illustrated is such an iconic brand, an iconic name that it may be one of those that we've already seen it change hands at a time, and now it's with the Arena Group. There may have even been someone in between those two. I can't remember, but let's say the Arena Group needs to give it away, and I think that it's such a name that we may see a couple other ownership groups try and revive it and try, kind of like you look at Slam on the CGC census, and we've talked about this before, Mike, but there's like what? There's like 7 or 8 different
yeah.
publishers or owner, whatever the right terminology is, that has had Slam underneath their umbrella. And I wonder if eventually Sports Illustrated will go that way, because it just seems like it seems like too big of a thing to just totally die. I got to think that if the Arena Group can't make it work, someone else is going to give it a shot, at least hopefully, because I don't want to see it go away. But man, it's really sad what's happened.
Yeah, and to be honest, there's a ton of brand equity in the Sports Illustrated name that goes beyond whether or not the publication is going to survive in physical form, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, what that might look like in the future, I don't know. But yeah, it may very well leave, print publications.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eye on this and see if there's any more developments. Shout out to that reporter who uncovered this. That's incredible investigative work,
Hmm.
and just shame on the people from SI who are involved.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my actually one of the things that I thought about were like the journalists that have come before them. It really is a disservice to them.
100%. All right,
I'm
we'll move
gonna
on to
pass this
topic
back to
number
you.
2.
Yes, passed it back to you.
Okay. Yep. Let me reshare mine. There we go. And that's what we want. Okay. So topic number 2 is, once again, since we've been away for a little bit, we felt like it would be good just to touch on the status of the market with Sports Illustrated and with, just sports magazines in general. And Mike, I know for me, one specific one that I'd like to talk about and that we can start with is
Yeah,
the Michael Jordan 1983 first cover
yeah.
um, that just sold. Do you have something pulled
Oh,
up for that?
sure. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'll just take it back.
Yeah, take it back.
All right.
But yeah, there was a Michael Jordan first cover, 1983. This is in his North Carolina jersey with Sam Perkins. It was a newsstand. It was graded CGC 8.0. Pretty good grade for, that 83 issue with MJ, especially because this was a double issue. This was the college basketball preview, so it was thick. It's got a ton of color on both the front and the back covers. So it's a pretty difficult issue to grade. 8.0 is big in, what I think easily would be considered a top 5 issue as far as collectability. So anyways, you can see there on Mike's screen, final price went for $4,416.99. By the way, the seller was Bobby P. I want to give him a shout out. He's around a lot on like Instagram and Twitter, and he's got like one of the most amazing collections. And he's one of the greatest hype men for the hobby. He's always posting his stuff and sharing it, and he's real big into the history of it. So, definitely shout out to Bobby P for all that he's done for the hobby. And putting up this 8.0 Michael Jordan, that was a pretty big move for him. What do you think about this sale?
It was a big move, especially since you normally see these sort of things on auction house like Heritage or something, as opposed to straight on eBay. Um, but I think it was a great exercise. I was a little surprised that the price was a little bit more, but in a sense, maybe not. The down market continues, so we're going to continue to see that, I think, across the board. But it's really cool to make this, just readily available to everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, there are so few comps on this issue in newsstand and high grade. Um, I know there's been a couple subscriptions, like there actually just last month, I think a subscription 9.2 with the label still on sold for in the 2 to 3 thousand range. I don't remember exactly on Heritage, but to my knowledge, the only newsstand that has been an 8 or higher that has sold publicly was an 8.5 sold on Golden auctions like 2.5 years ago. And I
Hmm.
want and I want to say it went for like 11 grand. And the man, we talk about the hobby being in its infancy still now, but it really was whenever that one went up for sale.
Yeah,
So that's, to me, that's not even a realistic comp anymore. So it's just hard to know where these things stand. To me, and I think 4,400 is a pretty strong price. If I had predicted earlier, I would have predicted higher. I would have predicted around 6 or 7, I think would have been my guess going
yeah,
into it. But the most encouraging thing for me, and maybe I'm taking reading too much into this, but I'm pretty sure there were like 96 watchers on this.
mm,
And what I think is cool about that is I track a lot of these sales, and heck, I'm involved in a lot of this bidding sometimes. I've never seen a Sports Illustrated or a CGC Sports Magazine with 96 watchers. That to me shows
yeah,
that some interest is growing.
yeah. Agree. Yeah, that is a good sign. Curiosity, if nothing else, but it starts with that, doesn't it? Right. So
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I was one of the 96 watchers, and I knew I wasn't going to make a play on it. I mainly just wanted to see what happened. But still,
sure.
even a year ago, no way there would have been 96 watchers on that. And
No.
96 watchers, that's a huge number for like a big sports card.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I think that's well above average for most collectibles. Yeah.
definitely.
But this is one of the highest profile sports magazines that there is.
Oh,
So
easily, easily. And honestly, this kind of sounds odd to say, but I almost feel like this cover's become underrated in the past year just because his Star is Born first pro cover has gotten so much attention.
yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Speaking of, here's a recent sale of that in Raw newsstand.
Wow.
I remember we were commenting on this as it was happening, thinking that it would go for maybe half of this. But this kind of goes in line with these flagship issues in Raw newsstand going for big numbers. And we've talked about that in the past, why we think that is. But I think a lot of people want to get it on as low as they can, and then maybe grade it, hoping for something that's worth a lot more than they paid. That's sort of my take.
Yeah, and you've made that comment to me a couple of times recently, and I think it's proving to be more and more true that you're seeing a lot of these raw ungraded copies go for really like exorbitant amounts, really high amounts, um, compared to some of the already graded copies. It seems to be a little bit of the speculative side of the hobby coming
Yeah.
out. with people, really wanting, really being willing to pay big money for these raw issues and hoping to strike gold with a high graded copy. Whereas, an example I saw today, because this was an issue that I was watching, I was thinking about bidding on it. There was a Dr. J first cover
Yep.
newsstand.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw that one, Mike.
I did.
It ended in auction today. It was a 7.0, I believe.
Hmm.
I want to say that's from 1974. Beautiful
Yep.
issue. Dr. J first cover to me is big time, big time. And I think the final sale was under $300.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
234. So this is it right here.
okay.
I took a stab at it myself.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about putting a bid on it at the last minute. The only reason I didn't is because I own this. Mine's only a 5.0, but I'm happy to have a copy of it. So I backed off. But to me, the value in that in a 7.0 of Dr. J's first cover should be much higher. And I think that if we saw that exact copy right there get
Raw.
sold as a raw, it would
Yes.
probably sell for more than 238 right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think about that a lot. I think that's very true. But people love that speculative aspect of it. They want we want to play that game. So we want the big profit margin.
Yeah. And I want to mention Golden Stone 75 put a good question on there. When we were talking about Michael's first cover versus his pro cover, he says, "Do you think the pro cover is better?" And that's definitely a debate that we've seen some collectors talk about. Mike, I'll let you start. What's your opinion on that? We can talk specifically MJ, but maybe even just in general, a first cover that maybe is in college versus a first pro cover.
Oh, gosh, it is tough, and there's the aspects of each. You could definitely make the argument for either one. Um, but hmm, I'm a little torn, to be honest. I really appreciate them both for different reasons. I think this one's maybe still a little bit tougher and high grade. It's a little bit more condition sensitive. They're both condition sensitive, but this one maybe even more so. This has the gatefold, and it is older. I do appreciate how the Star is Born is in his Chicago Bulls uniform. That it's a solo cover. It's a great action shot. All those things are going for it. Um, but this is his true first cover. So I think you can't go wrong either way. We've talked about how in sports cards that any issues that have anything that comes out where you're still wearing a collegiate uniform as opposed to your pro uniform is usually less collectible. That doesn't seem to really translate into sports magazines as much, however. So I don't know. It might just be a matter of personal preference. For me, I appreciate both for different reasons, I guess is my true answer.
Yeah. And so for me, you bring up a great point about the sports cards and how typically a college card is not nearly as collectible as, the first pro rookie card. I think a big reasoning behind that is usually licensing because, like the big
Yeah,
brands like Topps and Upper Deck and whatever, they're licensed cards. Whereas I think typically those college cards were not. So I think that's part of that with the sports cards, in my opinion. When I'm looking specifically at the Michael first cover, the 83 that we've got on the screen versus his 84 A Star is Born with the Bulls, I think they're both easily top five of all time covers. And I think to me, I still give the slight nod to the first cover because it is older. I think that making a Sports Illustrated cover before you made a
mm,
professional cover, I think that just increases the kind of the coolness and legitimacy. I mean, pretty much anybody, just like we talk about sports cards, everybody gets a sports card almost, and lots of people got sports cards even when they were collegiate athletes, but not a lot of people make the cover of Sports Illustrated before they become a professional.
that's true.
So I think that adds a little bit of flavor to it. Also, I always talk about and think about like when you're looking at scarcity of an issue and pop counts, because magazines are disposable, right? A lot of these are getting thrown away. Um, I think Michael Jordan, by the time he was A Star Is Born with the Chicago Bulls,
Mhm. All right.
a bigger number of people had caught on to the fact that, hey, this dude is something special.
Yep.
And there were more people probably going out and grabbing that newsstand copy and maybe holding it. Whereas his 83 cover, yeah, he had just come off of hitting the game-winning jumper in the 82 championship game. Uh, I think I think it's actually a year after that. So, it's not like he was unknown, but still, he's a college guy. I just think that less people were going out and thinking that this is something to hold on to. Now, you also mentioned a really good point. The cover itself makes a huge difference, and whether or not they're the sole athlete, I think of Bo Jackson, or I think an Emmitt Smith are a couple examples where they had a college cover, but they were sharing it with multiple other people. They're kind of small, it's not just a primary Bo Jackson or a primary Emmitt Smith cover. And so then that's an example where to me, if that first pro cover is just them, that could
That makes a
exceed
difference. Yeah.
in collectability. And then I'll also give one more example. I don't want to ramble too much, but Magic Johnson is a really interesting example for me because Magic Johnson's first cover was his sophomore year in Michigan State. He's wearing like a tuxedo or whatever. I think it was 1978 was the year that one came out. And then his first pro cover was his rookie year with the Lakers. I think that was 79. And to me, even though this goes against what I just said with Michael, because really everything into consideration, that Magic first cover probably should be more collectible and more valuable, but I just like the pro cover better.
Yeah. I
I
actually like
think
the one in between. I like
the
I
one
like
in between is really
that's
nice
a really
too.
nice one.
Yes, it
It's a
is.
great slam shot.
But to me, if I had to pick one Magic cover, I'm going the first pro cover. But if I had to pick one
Mm.
Michael cover, I'm going his first cover with North Carolina.
And speaking of in between, this is the beautiful stepchild of the three here.
Yeah.
I thought this was a really strong sale, by the way. Well, 9.0 is really high for even for a subscription, but it's a notable sale. I'll just leave it at that.
I don't even think I saw that one.
But I love this photo. I just think it's just a incredible cover. MJ wearing 9. That's cool in
Mhm.
his first Olympics there. Yeah, that's a great issue.
Yeah, that cover's definitely gone under the radar even more so than the other two for sure.
Yeah. All right.
Any other thoughts on the market? I mean, we did, I put out the monthly videos on highest sales, and
Yeah.
I thought this most recent one that I put out for the month of November had a really good crop of some strong sales.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what all was on there.
Um. Yeah. I mean, I just grabbed a couple of random things that stood out to me. There's a 9.8 of this pretty well-known issue here, 420. It's actually, I think, a pretty
Hmm.
very reasonable price for 9.8.
Oh yeah, so last month obviously we had the Michael Jordan 9.6 go for 36 grand. There was an autographed LeBron first cover that went for 5,500, uh graded at an 8.0 by the way. One of the collectors in our group shared uh how he had made a private sale buying a Muhammad Ali first cover 7.5 for 4,800. He even
Right.
he drove and met the guy at a hotel and they posted pictures of the exchange. That was pretty cool to see. Congratulations to him on that pickup. So, it's kind of funny because it was either the month before or 2 months before where I was like, hey, this is like the lowest monthly video sales that I've ever had. And then, like the next month, there's a bunch of huge ones again. So it just kind of is cyclical a little bit. You never really know. But to me, overall, I think I see the market in a strong place. I see more interested buyers, more interested bidders. The mid-range sales, which I would consider like between $200 and $600, I'm seeing a lot more of those, I feel like. Um, I don't think that I don't think anyone should judge the overall market just by the high-end sales. Because at the end of the day, even for, comics and sports cards, there's only a small percentage of the people that are playing in that game.
That's true. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Should I keep the screen as we go into the next topic here?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Why don't you lead on this one?
Okay, so the next topic is historical versus collectible. And this kind of came to me in kind of an odd way, sort of unexpected way, when I'm really into, well, the history of like of many sports, but one of the random sports that I'm interested in is or one of the random history of sports I'm interested in is skateboarding. And this is actually Tony Alva's first cover, I believe. Tony Alva and Stacy Peralta, if anyone has seen Lords of Dogtown or Dogtown and Z Boys documentary, or familiar with Bones Brigade, all that stuff from the late 70s and 80s. These were some of the the first skateboarders in the sense that we grew up knowing them. They came from a surfing background and completely changed the sport from being kind of a novelty, you know, uh, sort of, I don't know, gimmicky kind of thing to something that's a lot more edgy. So these were the sort of the pioneers of that. And Stacy Peralta, he's gone on to like be a film, director, and he's won awards, but he was also one of the first champions. And this is his first cover. So, I have this cover as well as we've talked about Tony Hawk's, first main cover, and Thrasher magazine, which is the most well-known skateboard magazine, I would say. So my girlfriend actually asked me, is the Stacy Peralta cover, is that as big a deal as, the Tony Hawk, magazine that you got? And I told her, I was like, well, if you are, a history buff of skateboarding, yes, but in general, no. And that's when I kind of made the statement of, historical versus collectible. And that got me kind of thinking down that path. And this is where this was, this sort of idea for me was, born out of. But as I started to think about it in larger scope, it really started to like, you know, um, sort of speak to something a little bit different, in the sense of, events being historical, right? So like September 11th was obviously a huge historical event that affected everybody, especially in this country. So everyone in the world, really. But at the time, you see how cheap these things, are selling for. I think everyone was like hoarding these magazines. We knew that this is a significant event at the time. Um, so people kept them, and they're plentiful, and people still have them. This is JFK's assassination. I think it kind of speaks the same thing here as I'm looking through some of these sales. People just have these. People just have like lots of them, like, oh, I'm just, when it happened, it affected everyone. Everyone was grabbing these things. Um, Sometimes it starts to, I think, bleed over to collectible, where this is a pretty well-known Time magazine. This is one of several that have the X on it. This happened after, World War II was wrapping up and Japan was defeated. Um, this is in high grade, I think, is pretty collectible in newsstand. But again, I think a lot of people probably did order some of these things, but this is a historical issue here. And kind of coming back to sports, I guess, is a good idea. But stuff like this, Mark McGuire hitting 62. I think a ton of people grabbed this issue, put it in a shoebox somewhere or in a box and kept it. There's a lot of those. Um, And it's also an example of just something that didn't age well. Had McGuire still been, celebrated, if he was still celebrated at this point, maybe this would still be, collectible. Thing is that it's a combination of being historically, pertinent and people actually wanting it. It's the whole supply and demand is always going to come into play no matter what it is. So, truth is, McGuire's just not that collectible, you know. OJ Simpson, like, we all know this cover. But this, I mean, here's a newsstand sold for $12. I think a lot of people stored this away. Not a lot of people necessarily need this in their collection. Um, there's other examples that are similar to that, but I think this is kind of like speaks to that point pretty well.
Yeah, and with the McGuire, I mean, the weight of that moment, or even really the whole 98 home run chase, that's one of these that you and I lived through. And maybe for someone who's maybe a teenager now, or who wasn't growing up, or who wasn't old enough to remember, they would look back or read back on that and have no comprehension of how big of a deal that was at the time.
Yeah,
And so, it is, there's so much to how these covers, like you said, how they age over time. And it's like you have certain covers that were massive historical moments, but what's the staying power of that athlete or that moment, and how has it changed? And the McGuire is a great example because, you know, unfortunately, due to the steroids issue, none of those McGuire issues, or Sammy Sosa or even Barry Bonds really are all that collectible because they've kind of been tainted. And on the flip side of that, it's kind of interesting looking back over time and over the decades how some, certain moments and certain athletes for whatever reason have developed that staying power, and they've kind of almost transcended in collectability other athletes or other moments that at the time were probably bigger. And Mickey Mantle is really an example. I mean, Mickey Mantle is an absolute great. I think he's probably right around, top 10 greatest player of all time, but no one's putting him in the top three. No one's putting him in the top five. And yet he is hands down considered to be like the number one most coveted athlete to collect. I mean, for a baseball card or for a Sports Illustrated magazine, pretty much. And a lot of that is just because of some of the, different factors and nostalgia and the staining power and kind of how it snowballed into what it is now. But, I think that pretty much any of us in the Sports Illustrated hobby would say that overall, Hank Aaron or Willie Mays had a better total career than Mickey Mantle, but we'd rather have a Mickey Mantle first cover. Um, that's kind of interesting to me. I think another thing I think of is like Roger Bannister. He was the first Sportsman of the Year in 1955. Or it might have been 54. I was thinking they didn't give one out the first year, but whatever the year they first gave out Sportsman of the Year, it was Roger Bannister. He was the first person to break the 4-minute mile barrier. And at that time, that was enormous. That was an enormous historical moment. But, you know, now in 2023, I think it's cool. But overall, that Roger Bannister cover isn't what I would call super, super collectible. And then you even think about some of the Olympic athletes,
yeah,
the Michael Phelps, or whoever, going back into all those previous Olympics, and we've had all these heroes, and those covers have just never really proven to be all that collectible either. So
no,
it's really interesting to me, comparing how some of these moments and athletes, um, some have staying power and some don't, and sometimes they don't really make sense, but it just
you,
kind of
you
is what
know,
it is. It's based on public perception, it seems like.
yeah, definitely. You bring up a great point with the Olympic athletes. We never really grow the same bond towards them, I think, than we do with some of these other like traditional sports heroes. It's almost like they're the flavor of the month. They're around for either that Olympics, sometimes a couple of them, but they're every 4 years, and we're really excited for that short period of time that they're doing their thing during the Olympics. But then we kind of like move on. Um, these ball players that are kind of like they become a part of our lives sometimes for as much as 2 decades.
That's a great point. And honestly, I haven't really ever thought of it that way. So I think you're exactly right. And uh, for me personally, Usain Bolt is one of my top five favorite athletes of all time. And with him, maybe it makes a little bit of sense because he won gold medals in the 100 over three different Olympics. So, like what you just said, it wasn't necessarily a one and done for me. Like Usain Bolt was there one Olympics, and then he was there,
Hmm.
4 years later, and then 4 years later again after that, still at the top. And that also makes me wonder, like, why Michael Phelps covers wouldn't be a little bit more desirable because he was
But
the
they
same
they
thing.
but they go away for those couple years in between,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
true, true.
I think about sometimes I think about like Star Wars in the 80s, and it never went away, even though the films were a few years apart from each other. It's like it was around us like air. It was everywhere. We had our bed sheets, we had our toys, we had this, we had that. It was, there was glasses at the, Burger King. It was always around us. So the thing is, like, I think that these stars, they come and then they go. Sometimes they come back, but then they go again.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I had two other covers that I wanted to show.
Let
Um,
me give it to you back to you.
Here, I think I'm okay. There we go. Um, Let me drag these over here. So you were showing some of those covers that, like the OJ that maybe, they're historical, but are they collectible? I mean, this is one for me as a
Mm-hmm.
big Kobe fan,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in my opinion, when you've got athletes who are being portrayed in a negative light,
Yeah.
that just, it's not super collectible. Like Kobe Bryant is my number one. That's the person that I want, that I collect the most of, but I don't want I don't want a slabbed issue of that. I'm sorry.
Right.
And here's a Mike Tyson that's kind of the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just if you adore these athletes, you don't want to see them, at their lowest moments, whether they're getting knocked out or getting charged for a crime or, losing a big game or whatever. So, and I almost feel that same way about the 9/11 covers. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Super historical, one of the most, if not the most, memorable moments in my life, but is a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know that it's something that I want to display. Maybe it's something that I keep tucked away just for that memory. But it's tough to want to, like I said, display some of these low moments or tragedies.
That's a great point. The whole display factor, right? And we touched on this when we were talking about the Time magazines with Rick and a couple episodes ago with
Mhm.
the World War II. And there's some of those are very collectible. There's a big market for that stuff, but some of it, it starts to get to a point where like, well, do I want that on my wall? It's
Right.
not everybody's going to want something like that on their wall. So, it is tough when it comes down to that. And I think that that's a great point.
Yeah. You got anything else you want to mention on this topic?
Um, no. No.
Okay. I was just reading this comment. Yeah,
Oh yeah, sure.
there are covers that are both historical and sought after, and,
100%.
and that's true. Yeah, so sometimes the history of the moment is one of the things that catapults a certain issue into being extra collectible. And GKL on the live chat mentioned Jackie Robinson. Absolutely true. I think there are a handful of Sports Illustrated covers that wouldn't be collectible at all if it weren't for the moment being so big. I think immediately to the catch with Dwight Clark and the 49ers in 1982. Dwight Clark is not a Hall of Famer, and if that moment, there's been so many big like playoff moments. that just for whatever reason haven't had the staying power as that moment. I don't know if it was
Hmm.
just because of how well it was photographed or what, but the catch from 1982 it just continues. It transcends, and that cover is huge because of that moment. And maybe even I always also think of the 99 Women's World Cup with Brandy Chastain, ripping off her shirt. And that was another one that to me, okay, a Brandy Chastain cover really doesn't seem all that collectible, but it's the moment, right? And so
The
I,
U.S. hockey cover, of course.
yeah, yeah.
We definitely we dove into that in our very first episode, I believe it was. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's go to topic number 4, which is single page grading. And I will, okay, good. I'm still sharing my screen. So let me slide another thing over for this one. So when we're talking single page grading, typically what we see is CGC grading an entire magazine. But I've started to see more and more of people sending in single pages. And I guess it's not necessarily being graded because they're not giving it a numerical grade, but as you can see, they're simply labeling it with a PG for page. And this specific one I've got on the screen, this is significant because this is the first time that Michael Jordan appeared on the interior of a Sports Illustrated. This is actually a collectible issue in itself because it's the first cover for Isaiah Thomas when he was cutting down the nets with the Indiana Hoosiers. And also, I think that's kind of a little bit of funny irony considering how much those two hate each other.
Yeah.
That Michael Jordan's first interior appearance is in Isaiah Thomas's first cover. But I've seen a lot of these getting sold for 150 or so dollars, and I think it's just something that's interesting and worth talking about. So, Mike, what
This is
are
also
what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. This also, by the way, has Chris Mullen on it and Patrick Ewing from 1981 on the same page. Yeah, this this is kind of they for I guess to make a pun against my will. They're kind of taking a page from the comic book world here because this is not uncharted territory for comic collectors. Um, Actually, I have a few examples. If I Is it all right if I share some of these?
Yep.
So, sometimes like a Batman #1, for instance, is an incredibly expensive comic book. Um, I don't know exactly how much. I want to say it's at least many tens of thousands, if not more. But this is a page.
Hmm.
This is actually at page 18 from yeah, Batman #1. So here's a page. You can say I have a page from this historic comic book. Here's Batman #1 from 1940, Superman #1 is from 1939, and here's a page. And to be honest, I think it's displayable. I was like, I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm showing a page from the very first Superman #1. That's kind of cool, actually.
Why don't you buy
Um,
that one, Mike? 25,000.
yeah, apparently they think it's pretty cool too. This one actually displays even nicer, probably. This is Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the very first appearance of Spider-Man in any comic book. But yeah, these some of these have very hefty price tags. But here's another interesting one. This is Iron Man's first appearance in Tales of Suspense, and this is the first cover. This is just the cover only, and this is given the CVR designation. I haven't seen any instances, and I'm sure that they must exist, but or maybe I'm assuming they exist for something with sports as well. But I haven't really seen any instances where that's been done. I can see somebody doing that with like a Mickey Mantle first cover, for instance, or something like that. It's not going to be necessarily a huge price tag, but look at this. I mean, this is almost $2,000 for this.
Mhm. I,
Um,
I have seen it, Mike, with the sports
oh, have you?
magazines, at least once, if not twice. Um, to me, if you've got the entire magazine intact, I don't see really the upside in doing that. But there are plenty of cases where a cover comes unattached, or maybe the interior of the magazine is missing contents. And in those cases, or maybe some water or some liquid got spilled and it really ruined the interior contents. It got spilled while it was open, but the cover is still in pretty decent shape. Maybe some of those instances I could see the cover only, but for the most part, I gotta feel like if you got the entire magazine
Oh yeah,
intact, it's a better idea to go ahead and have the whole thing graded as opposed to a single page or a single cover.
for sure. Citizen X in the chat actually makes a statement that I wanted to bring up. He said it would be a good idea to grade a single page versus a subscription issue. In some cases, I think that's very true. For instance, like that Michael Jordan page, you can easily get that Isaiah, issue for next to nothing
Hmm.
in subscription
Hmm.
and take that page out. Now, I'm not recommending people destroy magazines or anything, but that page may sell more than that subscription issue in all reality.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think I wanted to mention that too. I mean, we make such a big deal on subscription versus newsstand when it comes to collectability. And of course, that's primarily because of scarcity. But if you're just starting to do single pages, well, that goes out the window because it doesn't
yeah,
matter if it was a newsstand or a subscription, that interior page is going to be the exact same. And so there's not going to be as much of a scarcity factor, at least not with any Sports Illustrated. Because I mean, for this Michael Jordan, for example, we know that there were well over 2 million subscribers in 1981. And, of course, a lot of those got thrown away, but still, there's a lot of subscription copies of that, 1981 Isaiah Thomas laying around. And like you said, you could get a lot of them for really cheap and just rip out this page and sell it. And kind of
mhm,
interesting to me. I don't see a ton of upside with the Sports Illustrateds just because, like I said, I think that the volume is just going to be a little too plentiful and too heavy. And also, how many athletes really are there out there that we care enough about their first interior page? Michael Jordan obviously is one, but I
right.
I don't feel like there's all that many more. So, but
Well,
but but I think it's interesting. I really think it's interesting.
yeah, I agree with everything you just said, but I did start to think about it a little bit deeper, and it started to bring me into some interesting areas. So, some just classic ads for magazines, before Sports Illustrated. I mean, this is like with Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio and Stan Musial on here. That displays very nicely. I could see something like this, over time. Babe Ruth never had like a Sports Illustrated cover. He only has, and his magazine covers are tough, right? So maybe a nice ad, encapsulated might be something that people would actually think is kind of cool. Um,
I
I
think
mean,
those are super cool.
I have a book. I have a huge book of like old like newspapers that go all the way back to the 19th century through maybe the 50s. And I was always so intrigued by like, the 1920s and like seeing like these big things like of Babe Ruth, these drawings or photos of Babe Ruth and Honus Wagner and Ty Cobb and the whole, all everybody from back in the day. Just seeing them depicted like, in the newspaper, something like this is kind of cool. You have like Ty Cobb on this ad, Christy Mathewson, Grover Alexander. Um,
Oh, sorry.
Here's another one of Ty Cobb. Oh, did I lose you guys?
No, I was trying to pull something up. I accidentally covered up. I think you're good.
Oh, yeah. So here's a cool one with Ty Cobb. I mean, that's actually really cool. If that was, slabbed, I could see that being desirable. I think I have one more here. Like, that's kind of cool. It actually kind of got me thinking in a different direction. Apparently, other people think it's worth something too. Um, I don't know how quick I'm going to rush towards doing something like this, but it is food for thought.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. And there were two instances of this in my monthly video where I do interesting magazine sales
Yeah.
from last month. There was two back to back where someone had pulled out a couple really old vintage ads from a 50s copy. I think, one had like Stan Musial and Ted Williams. I can't remember what the other one was, but sent it in a CGC and it was just the page only graded and it said PG. and both of them sold for like $50. So, I mean, was there any financial gain there overall after you factor in the grading and shipping? Probably not, but I do see some appeal there as far as collectability and display. I thought that they both looked really cool, and it is true. A part of me, whenever I slab a magazine, although I love the cover and the display, sometimes a part of me is sad about
Yeah.
the wealth of awesomeness inside the magazine, and how some of those I wish could be appreciated more. I mean, there are so many times that
Yes.
I'm flipping through, like before I press a magazine, I'm like, oh my gosh, some of these photos are just awesome. And those photos in themselves would look great slabs. So I don't think that this is an area that's ever going to be like, financially fruitful for those type of people who like to flip and make a profit. But I think it's pretty dang cool for someone who's just interested in coming up with some nice displays.
Agreed. I think the only way that it really, well, not the only way, but one of the ways that it would be fruitful is if instead of just giving it a PG or C VR, because not all of these covers only are the same. You
Hmm.
know, why not give it a grade?
True.
I mean, I know that that's probably, CGC would be like, oh my God, no. But I think, there's room for that somewhere, maybe eventually. But
Yeah, and
some
that's
of these,
what Goldenstone said in his comment. He said he likes the idea of single page grading, but he thinks it's a mistake by CGC not to grade the pages. And you know
mm,
what? That is an interesting thought. What if they still had they still put cover, and that's kind of the main portion of the grade, but then they give the cover a subgrade. So maybe the cover is a 10, maybe the cover is an 8.0, maybe the cover is a 1.0. To me, if that ever happened, which I've never thought about this until just now, by the way, just through this discussion, it's making me think of it. But if they did that, then there would be some instances where someone might be like, okay, is it more worth it for me to grade this entire magazine that might come back as a 4.0 because, I know there's a lot of issues with the interior, or would it be wiser for me to do cover only because I think this cover is going to grade a 9?
right.
That'd
It's
be
a
kind of
whole,
interesting.
whole new ball game. I do think that there is a place for like these ads, however. Um, I'm not sure exactly where and how and when, but I mean, to me, now that I'm looking at this, like $36 for like this genuine 1915 ad with Ty Cobb is pretty cool.
I think it's very cool.
Yeah.
There's one that's going to be on my video that comes out next week for last month's interesting sales. I'm gonna slide it over here. Or wait, you've got your
Yeah.
screen shared right now?
I'm gonna give it back.
Yeah, okay. Let me show this one real quick. This is not a sports magazine, but I thought it was really cool. And also this is going to bring another part of this discussion. Um, so this is a Time magazine cover only, 1973, signed by Ray Kroc, the founder of
Yeah.
McDonald's. I think the cover looks pretty cool. This one sold on Golden Auctions last month, but the key thing I want to mention here is, as you can see, this was slabbed and graded by PSA.
Mm-hmm.
So how about that? We know that PSA unfortunately does not grade magazines at this time, but they will grade a single magazine page if it's autographed. They aren't necessarily grading the condition of the magazine of the cover, I don't believe, of the page, but they're grading the
Like
uh,
grading
the
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 autograph.
autograph
And,
itself.
and they would do this with a magazine too, I'm pretty sure, right?
Oh, with an entire magazine.
I
Well, I
think
don't know.
so.
I've never seen it.
Oh,
I don't think they've got slab holders that are thick enough.
well, you know what? You're probably right, actually.
Because when you think about it, you
Yeah.
see tons of them with Beckett,
So
right?
Beckett, you do.
Hmm.
PSA has yet to do that. That's true.
Yeah, I think I've only seen a couple of these with PSA, and I feel like the ones I've seen have been a cover only. But
Mm,
it makes you think, hey, if PSA's already got the size dimensions, why
yeah.
can't you just figure out a little bit of thickness and jump in the magazine grading game? Because that would be
Oh,
a game changer.
oh, yeah. That's something that we always kind of like fantasize about.
Hmm.
Whether that be to push CGC a little bit further or just to have PSA take it and run with it. Golden Stone 75 just said something else interesting in the comments here. That CGC won't grade that page unless it's accompanied with the rest of the magazine. I, I've never tried.
I don't believe that's true. I don't know 100% because I haven't sent one in. I actually have several that I'm planning on sending in soon, a couple single pages just because I want to try this out. But just from some of the research and examples I've seen, I don't think that's true,
Mm.
but I'm not gonna definitively say that.
There's somebody in the Sports Illustrated Facebook group who was talking up the idea of sending in pages. I forget who it was and exactly what they said, but I remember them saying, I think it's only $15 a pop. It's quite cheap.
Oh, it's a different fee?
I think so. I think I again, I could be wrong on this. I think it's $15 a pop. Obviously, you don't have to press it. I mean,
Right.
you can press it, I suppose,
Yeah.
but you don't
There's
have to.
there's no need to because they're not giving you
No
a
real
number
need
on
to,
it.
right? No grade. So, I guess it just depends on how it looks, right? It's up to you
Yeah.
personally, but $15 is very cheap if that's the case. And another thing that we didn't share here is there's been instances of those inserts with the baseball cards from the first few Sports Illustrateds,
Hmm.
where those have been um, encapsulated and sold separately.
Good idea. Wonder if you'd ever
Yeah.
see that with the SI for kids. Just, instead of trying to pull out a single card that might have value, like, the Tony Hawk or Tiger rookie, just encapsulating the entire sheet of cards.
Well, now that you say that, Cassius Clay, um, he his first rookie card was a part of a sheet,
Hmm.
and now I'm trying to think. I think PSA has encapsulated full sheets. I'm trying to see if I can find that because
And while you're looking at that, Mike, my
it's
impression of the single page grading with CGC, this is how I thought it worked, and this is what I have been planning on doing here with an upcoming submission is let's say that you're wanting to grade that Michael Jordan page that's in the Isaiah Thomas issue. My impression was that you could send in just that single page of Michael Jordan, but whenever you fill out your submission, you're going to fill it out. You're going to select that, Isaiah Thomas cover from 1981. And then like um, whenever they do the label CGC, it's going to notate like that issue. Now it usually will say off to the side if it's something like, it'll say like Michael Jordan first appearance, but on the middle of the note on that label, it's going to say 1981 Sports Illustrated and then whatever issue.
hmm
And then I thought it was still the full like, $25 grading fee, but I don't know that for sure. That's just kind of my impression. That's what I thought it was.
just sent you a link of the Cassius Clay that I was just referring to. So that's his rookie right there.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, well, I've
And
seen that. I've seen
it's
that rookie, but I did not know it was on a sheet.
yeah,
Huh.
but it is just one page, so that speaks to your point of them still not doing a full magazine.
Yeah, interesting. So,
Great.
all right. Thank you all for tuning in live and really appreciate the participation with the questions and the comments. That's always fun to play off of. And yeah, we're definitely hoping to, not lay off a month until our next one. We'll try and get another one out in a couple weeks. And Mike, thanks again for doing this. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, always.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks
All
again.
right, guys. Take care.